Today we're going to do a bit of cooking with leftovers. So I've got the remains of a Sunday lunch here, and we're going to turn this into a Monday dinner. We had roast lamb yesterday with roast potatoes, roast parsnips. These are chestnuts, butternut squash, there's some bits of lamb there, and we've got some Brussels sprouts and carrots. Now ordinarily with leftovers from a roast dinner like this, I might make bubble and squeak, which is just mashed potato, cabbage, vegetables, all mashed up together and then fried. What we're doing today is a little bit like that, but we're just going to take it up a notch. So all these bits are going to go in the food processor, but before I do that, I'm just going to chop them into smaller pieces. Otherwise, some bits will end up pureed, while other bits end up being whole. And doing this will give me an idea of the proportions I want to have here as well. So we want some parsnips in there as well. A good amount of these chestnuts. These are lovely chestnuts. Yeah, Jenny came home from walking the dog the other day with her pockets stuffed with amazing chestnuts. And yeah, so we might get back out there and have a few more of these. These I will chop up fairly small because they're a bit harder than the potatoes. And I want these to be in little crumbs, really. So I'll just run the knife through those a few times. I will have a little bit of this butternut squash, not too much because it's quite soft. I don't want the texture of this thing to become too mushy. Okay, right, so that lot's going to go in the food processor, but we also want the carrots and the sprouts as well. So bubble and squeak wouldn't really be bubble and squeak without some sort of cruciferous vegetable in there, some sort of cabbage or cauliflower or something like that. This is the squeak in bubble and squeak. Some people say bubble and squeak, the name originates from the noise of it frying in the pan. So other people say it originates from the idea of what the cabbage does to your digestive system. I suppose we'll never know the truth. Actually, I think we'll save some of that for soup. That lot there, minus some of the meat, is going to be made into soup another day. That lot's going to go in the food processor. We're also going to have, because there's lamb going in here, we're going to have some little bits of rosemary, just a bit of fresh rosemary, which I'll just tear up and put in there. Rosemary's good with lamb. Mint is also good with lamb, and cumin as well. So lots of options for flavourings that could just enhance that lamb a tiny bit. Right, so anyway, some little leaves of rosemary in there. And this leftover lamb, it was shoulder of lamb, so it is quite fatty. But I prefer it to leg because it's a bit more tender. So this I'm just going to dice up small. I might not put this in the food processor to start with. I'm just going to blend things down first in the food processor, and then I'll put this in so this doesn't end up just becoming dust. All right, so just going to run the food processor to get that kind of all combined into a homogeneous mixture, but not completely blended down to soup. That's good. I have got a couple of big lumps in there, but I think it'll be all right. And now the meat's going to go in. Oh, a little bit went on the floor there. And Eva was straight there like a rocket. Seasoning. Bit of salt. Bit of black pepper. We'll just run that again. Now what tends to happen with this food processor is all the stuff climbs the sides and then it's only the bottom bit that gets mixed. So I'm just going to get in there and break it up a little bit. Give it a chance to get recombined. Right, that looks good. Okay, so that's our mixture. And we're going to make some sort of croquette type of things here. So just take the sharp bit out and take handfuls of the mixture. I'm just going to form that into patties, into sort of little flat cakes. I'm pressing it together quite firmly because there's no egg in here or anything to bind it. It's just going to be bound by the potato and all the vegetables. I'll just lay these out on a tray for the moment, and we're not finished with them yet. But I kind of want to flatten them on both sides and make them into a proper disc shape, just to make them nice and neat. So flip it over. That's good. Nice, neat disc shapes. Depending on your vegetables, this may or may not bind together properly. If there's potato in there, potato does tend to be quite good at sticking this stuff together. But if you've got other vegetables, you might find you need to put some breadcrumbs in here and or egg to bind this together. These are doing pretty well on their own. Right, so we managed to get 7 little croquettes out of that mixture. If I'd wanted more, I could have used more of the vegetables. I'm going to bread these today, so just going to flour this board and then transfer my croquettes onto that flour. They are going to go back onto this tray when we're kind of almost ready for cooking. A bit more flour on top. And then we're going to bread these. So just to get them floured all over, the flour will help the egg to stick to them and the egg will help the breading to stick to them. But I'm not going to bread them with breadcrumbs. I'm going to use something else. Instead, we have some tortilla chips, supposedly fajita flavour. Now, sometimes people use cornflakes for breading things, but tortilla chips are pre-seasoned. We're going to need more than that, though. So there we go. That's my breadcrumbs, actually made of tortilla chips. That might not be enough, but I've got some left in the packet. We'll see how far we get with that. And then we'll just have an egg. So we'll just have a tiny splash of milk in there, just to loosen that egg and make it go further. Now, supposedly there's a kind of wet hand, dry hand method you can use for this sort of breading. So we'll get the little things in the egg into the, I suppose I'll keep my left hand dry for the crumbs. So we just toss that in the crumbs after the egg. It's not going to create a complete shell, it's just to give it a little bit of a crust on the outside. And then that goes onto the oven tray. And then on with the next one. Now, if you wanted a thicker shell, if you wanted to actually create a crust on them, you could do this breading process twice. You could go into the breadcrumbs, into the crumbs here, pick up a bunch of crumbs, back into the egg, and again into the breading. If that's what you want, you could do that, but I think this will be enough. Okay, well, and the rest of the process is a bit like that. So just making sure I get it on the sides of the things as well. So that's what the fingers are doing in there. We're just making sure that we get all the egg onto the sides of these little croquettes, and then the breading will stick on the sides as well. Okay, we're down to the last one, and I think there's just about enough crumbs in there to coat this one. There is a little bit of leftover egg. What I tend to do with this leftover egg is I'll just put that bowl in the microwave and cook that for 30 seconds, and it'll just set. And Eva gets to have a little omelette with her lunch. Well, how about that? No wasted crumbs at all. Just the right amount. More by luck than judgment, I think, but there it is. Right, okay, that's the last one. So these now, I'll put them in the fridge, and that will help to firm up that potato a little bit. They're not going to be fried anyway. You could fry these. When the time comes for dinner, I'm going to bake these in the oven. Eva, is it good? Okay, the oven's preheating. While that's happening, let's just talk about a few what ifs. So firstly, what if you don't want the leftovers the next day from the Sunday dinner? Well, I suppose firstly, you don't need to. Those leftovers would stand in the fridge for several days before you made these. Alternatively, you could make these and then stick the whole tray in the freezer. And as soon as those are frozen solid, they'll come off the tray, put them in a bag or a box, and save them until you do want them. And you could cook these from frozen. They just take about 10 minutes longer than they would from fresh. Nextly, what if there is no leftover meat? Well, That sometimes happens on a Sunday dinner, doesn't it? You could just make, okay, so you could just make these with the leftover vegetables and potatoes, and you could have them as essentially what they are, bubble and squeak, as an accompaniment for sausages or eggs or bacon or all three of those things, and maybe some baked beans, actually, that'd be quite nice. Or you could add something else into these to make them into fish cakes, for example. Tin of sardines, drained and mixed in instead of the lamb, and you got sardine fish cakes. Or a tin of tuna, same deal, tuna fish cakes. Any kind of tinned fish. Or half a tin of chickpeas, drained and smashed up and mixed in, and have vegetarian sort of bean cakes. And we've got lamb in here, but really any kind of meat would do, any kind of leftover meat would do. Chicken, pork, turkey, beef, whatever you happen to have. Or you could chop up some ham and cheese, for example, and mix it in there. So many different options. And of course, so many different seasoning options as well. So I've got a bit of rosemary and black pepper and salt in here. You could put a bit of curry powder in there, chili flakes, whatever spices or seasonings or additions you like. But yeah, I've made these into fish cakes when there was no leftover meat a few times like this, and they're really good. So oven's up to temperature now. These are going to be baked for about 20 minutes at 200 degrees Celsius fan oven. Maybe 25 minutes. We'll see how they look. Right, everything is now done. Time to plate up. So, some buttered cabbage, the lamb croquettes, which are now crispy enough. They kind of rustle a little bit. Just a few steamed peas. And gravy. This is leftover from Sunday dinner. So I'm just going to serve Jenny and I'll come back and do a taste. Okay. Well, I want a bit more black pepper on my cabbage. Now, I'm not going to spend a long time in here tasting because the dining table is beckoning, but let's just have a little taste of these lamb croquettes, bearing in mind they are steaming hot. The flavour of the lamb has really permeated the potato. It is quite a fatty cut shoulder, and so the fat from that leftover lamb has worked its way into the potato, flavouring it. Chestnuts are just such a good combination with this as well. And that supposedly fajita flavour tortilla chip crumb just really complements the lamb really well, I think. So that's just leftovers. I hope it's been interesting. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.